How are we all doing today? All right, that was pretty good. This time I want them to hear you in Florida. How are we doing today? All right, I like it. Well, my name is Andy Matthews. I have the honor of serving as your Nevada State Controller. I want to start this evening by first acknowledging and thanking all the great folks here at Stoney's for being such amazing hosts. Let's give them a big hand. I want to thank all of you for coming out and joining us. What an amazing crowd this is. Give yourselves a hand. And while we're doing thank yous, this next gentleman is backstage somewhere. I want him to be able to hear you. Let's give a big Nevada thank you to Governor Ron DeSantis for joining us in Las Vegas. Well, I know we're all thrilled and excited to have the governor here with us and to hear from him in a few minutes. First, I have the privilege of introducing another great leader we have with us here this evening. This is someone who is a true conservative warrior in every sense. He's a man who has served our country in uniform. He's somebody who has served our state as our Attorney General, and to that I would add as one of the best, most accomplished and effective Attorneys General the state of Nevada has ever had. He is someone who has stood up and fought for us, for our principles, for our values, time and time again. I am honored to be able to introduce him tonight, and I'm grateful to count him as my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Adam Laxalt.
All right, Las Vegas. What a great rowdy crowd, huh? Can you believe it's been almost a year since we last welcomed Governor DeSantis to Las Vegas? So since the governor's on a book tour, I thought I'd take a few minutes to maybe tell you a few things you don't know about him. You certainly aren't going to hear from the media. But you know that Governor DeSantis played in the Little League World Series. It's pretty cool, huh? And it was baseball that took him into Yale, and he showed up in this Ivy League school in jean shorts and flip-flops. But that's what forged the iron and made him the conservative warrior he is today, having to fight against all those liberals at Yale. But Governor DeSantis, once 9/11 hit, that's when he decided he needed to serve his country. And so here he could have gone and cashed in like a lot of his classmates, but he swore into the U.S. Navy. That's actually where he and I met. We were roommates in naval officer training, if you can believe it. And then Governor DeSantis went on to deploy with the Navy SEALs doing detainee operations in Iraq in 2006 and 2007. So, you know, that's when he first began to serve our country, and who would have imagined just a couple decades later that he would go on to become the most consequential governor in all of our lifetimes. You know, he was elected in his early 40s. He's only 44 right now. So he spent the first 4 years of his 40s with little kids fighting for all of us across the country, whether it was COVID, whether it was Disney, these things. Every time he was faced with the left trying to restrict liberty and freedom, he stood up each and every time. If only our state and every other state in America had courageous leadership like Governor DeSantis, can you imagine where we'd be? So it's my great honor to introduce my dear friend and America's best governor, Governor Ron DeSantis.
Hello, Las Vegas. I bring greetings from the free state of Florida. And I'm armed with, fortunately, the #1 book in these United States right here. I think you guys hopefully picked up a copy. If you didn't, you can go online, DeSantisBook.com, to be able to do it. And we're really excited to have the great support for this. And, you know, I think about Nevada because you guys have been very well experienced in seeing Californians move into your state. And you said it, not me. But I want to tell you, if you look over the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen a massive exodus. It's really been a great American exodus away from states governed by leftist politicians imposing leftist ideology, and to states like Florida, who've really represented the promised land of freedom from so many people. I grew up in Florida, born and raised. I never in my life, until I became governor, saw California license plates in the state of Florida. I just never saw it. Well, I become governor, and particularly once COVID hit, we started to see California license plates. And I can tell you, Floridians got really spooked by that. Because they were thinking, like, how are these people going to vote? I mean, what's going on here? But I'll tell you, I think even those folks that have come to Florida have come for a reason, because they understand that these leftist state governments can destroy the quality of life for their citizens. And in Florida, we've gone a much better path. We've gone a path that's made us the fastest growing state in the union, made us the #1 state for net in-migration. We're #1 in GDP growth amongst large states. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, lowest amongst all the big states, and we're #1 in tourism, of course. And so how did we get there? And not that Florida was bad before I came, but we've really seen something really incredible over the last few years. And I think this part of the story of the book is, I think, one of hope, because we see so much negative with our country. We see Biden running it into the ground. We see left-wing groups wreaking havoc all over our major cities. And I think what we could show in Florida is, I got elected governor in 2018 by 32,000 votes. 0.4% of the vote I get in. And if you look at Florida's history, the previous decade and through my election, all the major races in Florida were decided by 1 point. Governor, president. It was a razor-thin state. It was the biggest, most expensive, dynamic swing state in the country. So I'm in there at age 40, and I have to take the helm of the 3rd largest state in the country with a $1 trillion economy. And so you had to approach that in a way that could set yourself up for success. So I talk in the book about, I was advised by a lot of people, hey, you won a very close race. The state's evenly divided. You're going to need to trim your sails, go in there, don't rock the boat, let things settle down, and just be cognizant of that. And I rejected that advice. My view was that I may have won 50% of the vote, but I earned 100% of the executive power, and I would use that power to the fullest to advance the agenda that I campaigned on and the best interests of the state of Florida. But we would be bold because we believe that leadership should be done in bold colors, not pale pastels. And so we set out to lead. Now, I did not consult, and I told myself I wasn't going to do this, I did not consult any polls as governor. And I just made the judgment that a leader is not captive to the polls. A leader will set out a vision, execute the vision, deliver results for people, and if you do that, it didn't matter what the polls said, the people will follow you. They want to see results, and so that's what we did. We also understood that you can have the best ideas in the world as an executive. You can have make the best decisions in the world. But if you don't have people in your administration who are going to put your agenda and the people's agenda ahead of their own personal agendas, then you're not going to be able to execute these things in a way that they need to be done. And so I made it very clear to anyone working in our administration, your loyalty is to the people of Florida. If you're bringing any other agenda to this position, pack your bags and get out of Dodge right now. And so what you've seen over 4 years is no leaks, no drama, no palace intrigue, just daily execution where we're taking care of the people's business, and in the process, we're beating the left day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And finally, I said, I am not going to just sit around like some potted plant and hope good things happen. I'm not going to sit around like a lot of people get elected to office and they don't want to make decisions. They don't want to get involved in issues, because it is true. Every decision you make, there's going to be some people that like it, but there's going to be other people that don't like it. So if you're getting out in front of a lot of issues, there may be a lot of people that don't like that in a whole. But I said you got to go on offense. You can't just sit back and play defense. You can't let the media determine the narrative. You can't let the left determine the narrative. You've got to go on offense. And so I said I'm going to take on every issue I can see. I'm not going to wait to see, how popular it is or not. If I see something needs to be done, we're going to take action. And I remember sitting at the desk in the state capitol my first day as governor, looking around the office and thinking to myself, I don't know what SOB is going to succeed me in this office, but I can tell you this. They're not going to have anything to do, because I'm taking all the meat off the bone. I am not leaving anything behind. And so the result of, after 4 years of being a very energetic executive, being willing to lead, we went from winning by 32,000 votes in 2018 to winning by more than 1.5 million votes in 2022. It was the greatest performance that any Republican governor candidate has had in the history of the state of Florida. And it wasn't just me winning big. We swept all the statewide offices. And so now in the state of Florida, you have supermajorities in our state legislature. We flipped counties, county commissions. I won Miami-Dade County for the first time in a generation. And we won it by double digits, which is not easy to do. We were able to win over 60% of the Latino vote. We were able to win win independents by 18%. We were able to win women by almost 10%. And basically, we now have a situation in Florida, for the first time since the Civil War period, there's not a single Democrat elected to statewide office. In the state of Florida, we can say we came, we saw, and we have left the Democratic Party for dead. Now, part of the reason we're able to do it is because we had some big issues that percolated over these last 4 years. And when COVID came, governors came to the forefront. And every governor in this country had to make a decision. Are you going to be the one that is making these decisions? Or are you going to subcontract out leadership to entrench medical bureaucrats like Fauci and all these other people? And I'm just proud to say that in Florida, we did it our way. When the world went mad, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue, Florida stood as a refuge of sanity, a citadel of freedom for people, not just in Florida, but Americans and people even across the world who would come. We refused to let our state descend into some type of Faucian dystopia where people's livelihoods were destroyed and their rights were curtailed. And you know what? Every single thing we did, just about, we had an outcry from bureaucrats, the left, the corporate media, and yet now we look 3 years later, the elites got almost everything about COVID wrong. They were wrong about lockdowns. They were wrong about forced masking. They were wrong about closing schools. They were wrong to deny the existence of natural immunity. They were wrong about the efficacy of mRNA shots. And they lied for 3 years to try to deny the fact that this virus came out of the Wuhan lab, not out of a wet market. And I'd like to see people like Fauci held accountable for what happened. But if Florida had not stood up, I think people like Fauci and the lockdowners would have won. They wanted to create a situation in which if you wanted to travel from Nevada to Florida or Georgia, that you would have to show medical papers and your shot records. They wanted restrictions. And Florida said no to all that. We were the first state to ban vaccine passports in our state. We prohibited COVID jab mandates in our schools, K through 12, and universities. And when Biden tried to impose on employees, and some companies were doing it on their own, to force employees to take COVID shots, we called a special session of our legislature, and we passed protection so that the state of Florida, nobody has to choose between a job they need and a shot they don't want. We understood in Florida that these Faucian decrees were not about your health. They were about exercising control over your decisions. They were not based in science, they were based in politics. Just look at what Biden is still doing today by denying entry to people coming from foreign countries if they haven't had the mRNA shot. So you got Djokovic, the great tennis player. He said from the beginning he didn't want the shot, and he was vilified for it, but there was no evidence this was going to benefit him, and so he didn't do it. Now Biden still has this mandate. We want him to come to Florida to play in the Miami Open. And so I wrote Biden a letter, and I said, will you please stop the insanity? This is embarrassing. We're one of the only states one of the only countries in the world that is clinging to this, and I asked them to rescind it. I know they're not going to do that, but I did notice in the way they worded this restriction, it may not apply to people arriving in our country by boat. So I have offered to Djokovic, if you get to the Bahamas, we'll boat you into Florida. We'll get that done. I'll tell you what. You know, you also look at the difference between how some of these states are governed. A great comparison in states is Florida versus New York, because we're the closest of the big states in population. We actually have millions more people in Florida now than New York does. And yet, even though we have millions of more people, New York's state budget is twice the size of Florida's state budget. And yet we have better roads, better services, higher performing K through 12 schools, and no income tax. What is New York doing by taxing people? What are they doing spending all this money on? It's not improving the quality of life, I can tell you that. And the state of Florida, I'm proud to say, not only don't have no income tax, we have the second lowest per capita tax burden in America at the state level, and we have the second lowest per capita debt level at the state level of anybody in the country. So you know if you come to Florida, you're not going to be needed to be taxed in the future. We're not going to allow income tax. But you go to like Illinois and some of these places, they're insolvent. So you know not only are they taxing now, but 5, 10, 15 years into the future, they're going to be raising those taxes through the roof to try to meet their unfunded liabilities. And that just doesn't work. You know what else doesn't work? These cities and these left-wing states allowing criminals to run wild on our streets. That doesn't work. We in Florida stand for law and order. We don't believe in coddling criminals. We believe in prosecuting criminals. And when you had the rioting, the BLM riots breaking out around the country, we didn't have it necessarily happening in Florida at that point, but I immediately activated the Florida National Guard. We dispatched state law enforcement around the state of Florida. We sent the message, you are not burning down cities in the state of Florida. And guess what? It didn't happen. But we also knew we needed to get even tougher, so we signed legislation that says, you know, we're not going to treat people that riot and loot like they do in Portland, where they'll arrest you, take your mugshot, slap you on the wrist, and put you right back on the street to do it again. No, in Florida, if you're doing that, you're not getting a slap on the wrist. You're getting the inside of a jail cell because we're holding you accountable. And when we did the anti-riot legislation, I was actually condemned by the United Nations, which I wear as a badge of honor. You also have this issue of prosecutors getting elected, usually with massive financial support from people like George Soros. And what they do is they get in and they say, we're progressive prosecutors. We don't believe the system is just. We're going to take it upon ourselves to pick and choose which laws we choose to enforce. So you go to a place like they had in San Francisco or in LA, you'd have people get robbed, their cars would get stolen, their houses would get broken into, and they wouldn't necessarily even prosecute people for doing it. And so, of course, you're going to have public safety decline. Of course, people are going to flee those jurisdictions. If you, as a prosecutor, do not like a particular law, you don't have the right to nullify that. If you want to address it, you know what you do? You resign your office, run for the legislature, and then try to change the law, but you don't get to veto the law. So we in Florida, I let it be known that we would not tolerate prosecutors ignoring the law. And so we had a fella in Tampa that was elected with support from George Soros. He said there were certain laws he was going to refuse to enforce, and so I promptly removed him from his position. To me, law and order must mean that we have strong and secure borders and that we enforce our immigration laws. You look at all the tens of thousands of fentanyl deaths that we're seeing, that's a result of an open border, allowing the cartels to eat our lunch and send product into our country. And then we're in a situation where we have mothers who are losing children for not even doing anything bad. Maybe they made a small mistake, but they're taking something that they have no idea is laced with fentanyl, and then they end up overdosing and dying. And we just sit there, Biden sits there, and he mentioned the fentanyl death for one of the ladies, and he laughed about it. Did you see that? He laughed about it, and he's deliberately allowed this border to be open. And I think these cartels should be treated as terrorist organizations. I think fentanyl dealers should be treated not as like a street drug dealer. They should be treated like the murderers that they are, because they're killing people in our country. So Florida, they used to say in Florida, well, you know, you guys have, you know, big Latino population, and they're big supporters of Republicans too. You can't be strong on immigration. And I've proven that wrong. When I became governor, we promptly banned sanctuary cities in the state of Florida. We recently sued Biden on his catch and release policies because he's violating the law when he's doing that. You're not allowed catch and release. And just last week, we got a ruling from a federal judge in the panhandle of Florida that said Biden's catch and release policy is unlawful and it must cease. We're making progress. And as bad as the southern border with Mexico is, that's not the only area where we see illegal entry. In the state of Florida, I've had to do a state of emergency to assist the Coast Guard. They got boats coming in with illegals from Haiti and places like that. And so the Coast Guard, about 2 months ago, dumped 300 in the Florida Keys. And so we immediately marshaled, and the Coast Guard's actually they're trying hard, but Biden's not giving them enough resources. So I've marshaled all of our state assets. We're interdicting boats. The number of boats have plummeted, and we have now repatriated 11,000 illegals back to their home country. Open borders doesn't work. It's insane. But part of the things that bothers me is the left wants to impose open borders on our country, but they don't want to have to face any of the consequences of open borders themselves. You know how I know this? Because we were able to send 50 illegals to Martha's Vineyard. That's how I know this. They said, Martha's Vineyard said they were a sanctuary jurisdiction. They had an office in their downtown that said, nobody's illegal, refugees welcome, come here, we'll take. That was virtue signaling. That's all they were doing was virtue signaling. You have 50 show up. These Texas border towns are poor. They've got thousands and thousands. Martha's Vineyard, one of the wealthiest enclaves in our country, 50 show up. Did they take them and house? No, they called out the army and deported them the next day. We do need to have a wall built on the southern border. We need that done. And my offer is this. We just had last September a almost Category 5 hurricane come and bash through southwest Florida, and when it actually ripped through the whole state, but it knocked out 2 bridges, the bridge to Pine Island, and then it severed the bridge to Sanibel Island in 3 different locations. And those residents were being told by their local community that it would be 6 months before they would have the bridges repaired. And they weren't state bridges, they weren't our roads, but they came to me and they were worried because their islands would have died if that happened. And so they came to me and said, Governor, can you help us? I'm like, I'm going to help. So I got my guys together. I said, listen, I don't want bureaucracy. I don't want red tape. I just want to get this done. Time is of the essence. And 3 days later, we reopened the Pine Island Bridge 6 months ahead of schedule. So my offer to Biden is this. If you want to start getting serious about the border, I'll send my Florida crews down to the border to build the border wall. Just say the word. We'll get it done. If I was here with you 20-some years ago and I raised the issue of election integrity in the state of Florida, most people probably would have chuckled at the time because we had the 2000 election fiasco, the hanging chads, Bush versus Gore, and it was really a natural embarrassment that happened. And so there have been a lot of things that happened over the years. I became governor, and I said, we're going to make this a priority. So one of the first things I did as governor was remove the supervisor of election from Palm Beach County and the supervisor from Broward County. We had new people in, but we also made sure that we were enacting appropriate reforms to make sure that these elections were done well. In Florida, we have banned ballot harvesting in our state. We have banned Zuckerbucks in our state as well. Unlike Nevada, we do not permit mass mailing of ballots. And anybody that wants to vote by absentee ballot, you must show voter ID before you can get a ballot sent to you. And so the result of our effort is, and we track the ballots, so you know how many ballots have been received. Every 10 minutes it's updated. When the polls close, the election is over. No ballots coming in. It's over. And so the result in Florida has been, for both the 2020 election and the 22 election, we have between 8 and 11 million votes, depending on if it's a presidential or midterm. We have counted and reported the votes faster than any other state in the country. And that's how it should be. We're also leading, and we talk a lot about in the book about our battles, to ensure that the purpose of our schools is to educate our kids, not to indoctrinate our kids. And that includes K through 12, but it also includes the universities. And here's our view in Florida. These public universities and our K through 12 schools are funded by taxpayer money. And so they don't get to just do whatever they want without accountability. They are accountable to the taxpayers through the elected officials. And so we have every right to set the mission of these institutions. So in the state of Florida, we've said that our universities are not done for the purpose of imposing ideology on the students, not done for the purpose of fomenting political activism on campus, not to do things like promote quote-unquote social justice. That's not what a university is about. University is about the pursuit of truth. It's about academic integrity and raising the bar and giving students a foundation so that they can be citizens of our republic and think for themselves. So we're taking steps to make that happen. Right now in Florida, through our reforms, all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go if they're not performing well. We've also I recently appointed 6 conservative trustees to the board of a small liberal arts college called New College in Sarasota, and it is basically left of the left. It was uber Marxism, gender ideology, all that stuff. It was supposed to be, under our statutes, the top honors college in Florida, but it wasn't. So we brought in the trustees. They fired the president, hired a conservative president. They eliminated all DEI and CRT programs. And then they changed the mission statement to say that this new college is not going to be a partisan left institution. It's going to be the nation's top public classical liberal arts college. We're going to have our own Hillsdale College right in Sarasota, Florida. We're proud to have taken the lead across the country in banning critical race theory from our K through 12 schools. We're not teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other. We're going to teach them about what it means to be an American. We've elevated American civics because I think it's important that our students have a foundation to understand their duties of being citizens once they get out of our school system. They also need to have an appreciation of the people that have fought and died for our country throughout our history. We're also the first state in the country to establish every November 10th, the day in our schools is earmarked to teach our students at all grade levels about the evils of communist regimes throughout history. We're going to tell the truth about Marxism and Leninism. We also believe in parents' rights and making sure that parents can play a fundamental role in their child's education. Some of that is school choice. Some of that is making sure that parents are informed about their options. But part of it is parents have a right in Florida to know the curriculum that's being used in their kids' school, know the books that are being used. And we've had to expose the media on trying to say, we call it the book ban hoax in Florida. They're trying to act like we're banning books because we're saying it's inappropriate to have pornographic materials in a middle school library, and we've exposed that this is there. How does that get there? It gets there because there is, unfortunately, a concerted effort to inject these sexual matters into our youth's education. And I just think that that's fundamentally wrong. I think we need to focus on teaching the basics, reading and writing and history and science. And this came to a head in Florida last year when we passed the Parents' Rights in Education that said, you know, parents in Florida should be able to send their second grader to school without having a teacher telling them that they were born in the wrong body or that their gender is a choice. That is fundamentally wrong. And most parents agreed with us, regardless of their political affiliation. Most Floridians agreed with us. The left didn't agree with us. The media didn't agree with us. And Walt Disney Company did not agree with us. But you know, as long as I'm in the saddle, the state of Florida is not going to be governed by what some woke corporation based in Burbank, California wants. Now, the state of Florida is going to be governed on the best interest of our children and our parents and our school system. And so a lot of people thought, though, and the left was smart to try to get Disney into this, because people said Disney is just too powerful in Florida. And in fact, I mean, they've pretty much got whatever they wanted for 6 decades in our state. They're too powerful. They get involved. You know, the governor's not going to be able to stand toe-to-toe for them. And a lot of people, toe-to-toe with them, a lot of people bet that Disney would prevail. Well, they bet wrong when it came to Florida. So we signed the legislation. They said they were going to work to repeal it. Their executives were talking about on camera at one point that they wanted to inject sexuality in the children's programming. Look, I look through these things, these issues, not just as a governor, but also through the eyes of a dad. I have a 6, a 4, and a 2-year-old at home that my wife and I are raising, and I just believe parents should be able to send their kids to school, let them watch cartoons, just let them be kids without somebody putting an agenda down their throat. And so Disney had not only favorable treatment, they actually controlled their own government in Central Florida, 44-square-mile fiefdom, where there was no transparency, where they had total control, where they were exempt from law, major tax breaks. And so I said that arrangement no longer suits the state of Florida. And so I recently signed legislation ending Disney's self-governing status in the state of Florida. It's done. There's a new sheriff in town. So people will say, you know, why are we in this situation where, you know, you're seeing like gender ideology in the schools? Why are you seeing the women's sports issue? You know, Florida, I tried to sign a bill 2 years ago to say, you know what, women, our girls and our women athletes have a right to participate and compete with integrity and with honor and to not have men butt into their sports. And it's sad to say, but we've also had to take action against these doctors saying you cannot do sex change operations on minors. You know, you have these situations, they'll start pumping a 13-year-old girl with puberty blockers, and then a couple years later, they'll do a double mastectomy. And I have a lot of these girls now that are 20, 21 that went through this, and they're testifying against it. They regret doing it. They felt that they were pushed into doing it, but it wasn't the right decision. So in Florida, we've taken action. If a physician is doing puberty blockers or sex change operations for these minors, they're losing their medical license in Florida. We have seen a big change in how corporate America has behaved itself. And it's not just Disney. You see a lot of these banks and these other asset managers and other companies engaging in something called environment social governance, ESG. And you know, they're pursuing policies which I think are bad for all of us. They're against fossil fuels. They're against the Second Amendment, all these other things. But it's even a larger issue than just that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to make an end run around our constitutional system. Nobody has voted these people into office, and yet what they want to do is use their economic power to change policy. They want to impose their ideology on our society without our consent. So in Florida, we're fighting back against ESG. We're making sure that no ESG can be used in our state pension investments. It's about a $185 billion pension fund. And we're going to sign legislation during the upcoming legislative session to rein in these woke banks. You should not be discriminated against by these big banks because you're involved in Second Amendment, or you're a Christian, or you're a conservative. That's wrong. We've also seen corporate America put their personal interest in profit over our own national security interests with their indulgence in the Communist Party in China. And I think the CCP represents the #1 threat to our country, both in terms of economic, military, as well as strategic. And so in Florida, we're fighting back against the CCP. We've already banned things like Confucius Institutes at our colleges and universities. And I'm going to sign legislation in the upcoming weeks that are going to prohibit any CCP-linked business from making land purchases in the state of Florida. No farmland, no land near military, nothing. In Florida, we have a saying that we will fight the woke in the legislative halls. We will fight the woke in the corporations. We will fight the woke in the schools. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob, because our state is where woke goes to die. Now, we have a situation where the President of the United States he's weak leader, he's floundering around, no energy in the executive, and he is controlled by very far left elements within his own party. And that's why he's been doing so many destructive things. And I can tell you, he is somebody that is targeting Florida all the time. He's so concerned about what we're doing in Florida, always singling us out. He's got his press secretary that'll be wheeled out that'll attack Florida. And she's a piece of work, let me tell you. But the reason Biden is targeting Florida is because, just like comparing Florida to New York and Illinois and California shows that leftist policies fail and our pro-freedom policies work, if you look at Biden, all he's doing is mimicking what they do in New York and Illinois and California. And he knows that when people look at the success Florida has, he knows it's an unfavorable comparison with his administration. And so they attack and they try to demagogue. And all I can say is, I quote an old song from a band from Jacksonville, Florida, named Leonard Skinner, that I've heard Joe Biden sing about it, but a Florida man don't need Biden around anyhow. But I think what's happened, and one of the reasons why I think this book is good, is because there's a lot of pessimism. And I talk about the decline of our country in the book, and there's a lot of pessimism out there because it seems like we have a ruling class that continues to ignore what we as Americans want to see out of our national leaders. They indulge in a lot of failed enterprises and failed policies, and people look and wonder whether America's best days are behind us or whether they're ahead of us. And I think what we've shown in Florida with our Freedom Blueprint is that failure is a choice. Decline is not inevitable. Success is attainable. We have fought these people from Biden on down for 4 years, and we have beat them day after day, week after week, month after month. And so I'm actually optimistic. I'm optimistic about our state and Florida, but I'm optimistic that we can see success in other states and even for all of the United States. And it's not easy. I'll tell you, the fights that we've had, the fights that we've had in Florida, every single thing I did, the left has hotly contested it. The media has tried to smear me, and we just had to stand our ground and do what was right. I remember during COVID, when we were doing what we were doing, people were attacking me relentlessly. I had a lot of supporters calling me, being like, man, you are killing yourself with what you're doing. You need to do something different. You know, they were like, all these other governors are doing restrictions. Why don't you do something? And, you know, I just said, I got to do what I think is right. My responsibility is to the people that I represent. I got to care more about preserving their jobs than I do about protecting my own political hide. And so I was fine to let the political chips fall where they may. But make no mistake about it, given the left and how powerful they are in all these institutions, if you, it's not just about me, if you're out there fighting the fight, you know, you're going to take some incoming. You could be a parent going to a school board meeting. You get smeared by the left, get smeared by me. Hell, Merrick Garland may even send the FBI after you for going, can you believe that? But that's just what we have to face. Leadership right now is not cost-free. You are going to pay a price for it. But here's what I would say. The price that we're called upon to pay pales in comparison to the price that previous generations of Americans have had to pay to keep freedom alive. When I was in the Congress for a few terms, you'd fly up to D.C., and there was one route that you would take that was flush parallel to the National Mall going into Reagan Airport. And if you looked out the left side of the plane, you're able to see just really majestic vistas of the Lincoln Memorial, the reflecting pool, the Washington Monument, then up on the hill, the beautiful U.S. Capitol building. And it was inspiring to see, because that represents the ideas and the values that made our country great, some of our great leaders, and the tourists would look at it. But what I figured out after doing that trip a number of times is, as impressive as those monuments were, those were not the best monuments that you could see outside the plane. Because if you looked out the right side of the plane, you looked over the Potomac River, you looked into Northern Virginia, the monuments were much smaller, very, very nondescript, but arranged very orderly over the rolling hills of a place called Arlington National Cemetery. And it occurred to me that you can have the best Declaration of Independence in the world, you can have the best Constitution in the world, you could have some of the best political leaders in the world, but if you don't have people through multiple generations who've been willing to put on the uniform, stand out there, risk their life, and in many cases give the last full measure of devotion, then those ideas and those principles aren't going to amount to very much. And so the sacrifices we're called upon to make pale in comparison to those sacrifices. George Washington said it was the duty of Americans to preserve what he called the sacred fire of liberty. This falls to people like us in Florida. It falls to freedom-loving people in Nevada like yourselves. It's a responsibility. It's not one I shrink from. It's one that I welcome. But I'm very confident that if we step up and do it, and we never back down, that we will be able to turn this country around. Thank you all. God bless you.